Greetings from a fishing village on the Atlantic coast. You've tuned in to Podcast Portwenn, celebrating the world of Doc Martin unofficially. I'm Chesla Wexler, and we'll be discussing Doc Martin, the medicine, the mayhem, and the marvelous people of Portwenn. Martin Clunes made his debut as Martin's dad, someone I hope to see again, especially as Best Medicine is officially renewed. To chat about this episode, cleverly called Doc Martin, I have Doug and Erica, two of my Best Medicine Unspoiled people. Come through and welcome back to Podcast Portwenn.
Hello. Good to be here.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for coming. So I'm going to just launch right in here. I'm excited. So Doug, what did you think?
Well, I was a little disappointed that we didn't find out the whole thing about Rosemary, just that it was a thing, and there was no more information there. I was surprised that his parents didn't know why he left. So his blood secret is still his secret that he had not shared with other folks. One thing I really enjoyed was, it's kind of like, how did Martin turn out so well given where he came from?
Yeah.
So compared to his parents, he's an easygoing, likable guy. So I thought that was kind of an interesting juxtaposition.
Sure. What'd you think, Erica?
I liked it. I think we saw finally a separation from the doctor ruining an event with some mass illness or something like that, or delaying the event and everyone getting mad at him, while he wasn't on board in joining the slumber party so much. At least they didn't have that set up again. So I liked that a lot. I thought there was a lot of sweet moments between Louisa and the doctor, and actually the doctor and a few different people. It was nice to get a chance. I never watched the Doc Martin, so I'm not familiar with the actor that played.
That's why you're here.
So I didn't have much of a connection to him, so to speak, but it was good to see that maybe Martin isn't so bad when you look at how bad his father is. We just had a lot of touching moments, and he really kind of opened up. I love that he's trying the, what did he call it? The immersion therapy or something with the blood vial.
Exposure or something.
Exposure, that's it. Exposure therapy with the blood in the cabinet. Interesting with Elaine and Vanessa kind of telling her how it is. She really took that to heart. But I did also like how they ended it with Rosemary's name up there. It's clear that the doctor's working through some of his stuff and he's trying to, growing, so a lot of growth.
Yeah, I agree.
So picking up on what Erica said about the growth. So I thought it was interesting how Louisa, I think, helped Martin see that he needs to acknowledge, maybe talk about his past so that he can get through it. She was using the analogy of the school and all the events at the school that's going away. She said, it's like, if we don't talk about it, it never happened.
Right.
And that seemed to really hit home for him. And then he confronted his dad saying, why didn't we talk about this?
Yeah. And he went right out and he talked to Aunt Sarah to find out why he wasn't invited or he didn't go back to her, right?
Right. Yeah. Then crazy Aunt Sarah. Who would have ever thought?
I really loved his line, though, that he said, there's nothing for me to forgive. I thought that it was something I did.
Yes.
I thought that was really touching. And I think bigger picture, even outside of the show, I don't think enough people consider that as an option of saying, it's okay. Like you made a mistake, you did something, and you don't need to forgive. You don't need forgiveness.
Right. Yeah. And the way he said it, I don't remember the exact wording. Interestingly, she says, "Can you forgive me?" And he says, "No." And you're like, right? But he doesn't say there's nothing to forgive. He says it a little differently.
You've done nothing that requires forgiveness.
Or that you need to be forgiven for.
Yeah, or that you need to be forgiven for, something like that.
Yeah, it was better. Yeah, I thought that was good. What did you think of you've now seen two new actors, right? We've got Judith Ivey, who played Vanessa, and we've got Martin Clunes, who played Robert. So, Doug, what'd you think?
I'm kind of the analogy that I have is episode 1, right? It's like I really wanted to like the doctor, but really didn't like the doctor. And these guys, there doesn't seem to be nothing to like about them. They were just mean and rude and unpleasant. So
yeah.
So good acting.
Good acting, yes. I thought there was very good acting. You did dislike them, and that was the point.
Right.
What about you, Erica?
I actually liked them. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I liked them for who their characters were. And maybe what you said is a better way to say it. Obviously, it was good acting. But I thought that they stuck to their characters and they were different. And you're bringing them into a town of, let's just say, do-gooders and smilers and happy people. And here they came from this town or visited this town, and now they ended up this way. And I thought it was a great full circle of Vanessa being the harsh truth person. And then here she gets the harsh truth and she's hitting the piñata and not handling it really well. I thought that was a great moment.
Isn't she a psychiatrist?
That's what she said. I think she said she was a harsh truth psychologist or something.
Radical honesty or something.
Yes. I forget how she worded it, but I just thought they had a lot of contrast to what we've seen from other characters in the show. And so I enjoyed watching that.
My opinion was in one episode, you have more depth of character around these two people than we get depth of character in 9 episodes of other people. And maybe because this was sort of a one-off, like they're going to be here for this one episode, so their entire character needs developing right off the bat. So
are we allowed to ask, is that how Doc Martin is? And, is that how the senior Doc Martin is?
Well, you're allowed to ask anything.
Right, but you won't tell us. Okay.
Correct. Okay. Yes. In the second half of this episode, I will be talking through that with my Doc Martin people, but I have to keep you guys unspoiled,
Fair point.
So I have to apologize to Erica because I was convinced we'd know the root cause of the blood phobia. But it is what it is. Hopefully we'll find it at some point, but we certainly could see in that last scene. I watched the episode 3 times. There's a lot of prep stuff because there's a lot of things that you pick up that are arcs from the original show that I talk about in the second half of this. But at the very end, when Robert is talking to Martin and he just says, I cannot and I will not talk about her. And you just look at his eyes and his face and the tension in his face. And there's just so much emotion in that.
And he took a beat between when he said, I cannot and will not talk about her. Like he took that beat, like really hit home on that. That was nicely done.
Yeah. And, Aunt Sarah earlier when she was asking him and he said something like, I'm not going to talk about that. This has nothing to do with that. And she says, you mean her. And you really get a sense that this is a taboo subject. And I'm going to tell everybody who's watching this, I put a little Podcast Portwenn service announcement at the end of this segment, which you can choose to listen to or you can choose not. It's a little personal reflection about how to handle tragedy in your family when young children are in there. Because it's just something that I've got a little bit of experience with. I mentioned last week that idea of not talking about something hit home. So unfortunately, Doug, this disappoints you. We don't get to talk about it. So that was a stinker. What stood out to you about this episode? I mean, we see a lot of interplay between Martin and his parents. Either of you want to talk about, Doug, you want to start?
One of the things that jumped out at me is, and we had very little of this, but when they were working on Mark, when both doctors were working on Mark, despite the seeming open conflict, when they had a doctor thing to do, they were together.
Yeah.
Right? They seemed, once they agreed what they were going to do, even though that was different, they were together on, okay, we're going to do this. Let's do this together. And, oh, by the way, I got to go fast because there might be blood.
Yes. Yes.
So I thought that was kind of cool.
Erica, what did you think?
So I thought it was interesting that there was not only between parents and son, but between husband and wife, no eye contact, no physical contact. There was never any hug, hello, goodbye, hold of a hand on the small of your back, leading you into a room, his wife into the room. And we see a lot of that with Martin. Where, I mean, he not to that degree, but you could see where he wouldn't be comfortable getting a hug, even when Aunt Sarah hugs him and he's like, okay, all right, we don't need it to do that.
Right.
You can tell that I assume he picked that up from watching his parents have that kind of lack of connection.
Yeah, could be. I just remember at the very beginning, and I don't know why this stood out to me, probably because these characters were being introduced to me for the first time and I was so attuned to Martin Clunes to see how he would be. I did notice that she had his arm, like she was holding his arm when they first came into the surgery. But then after that, I don't think there was a heck of a lot of contact. And, they were always sitting across from him. You didn't have the two of them looking at each other. They were always sort of parallel. And to me, it looked very much them against Martin.
Well, and even though the arm walking in, to me it looked more like a serviceable act, not an attentive or caring act. It was almost like that generation does that. They help their wife into a room or up the stairs, carry their suitcase kind of thing. So I took it as more of a serviceable act than love. Not that they don't love each other, but
It sort of looked stiff.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then you've got this angle of him, having this gambling issue going on.
Sounds like that might have stemmed from the Rosemary situation. Sometimes people deal with grief by diving into something and then it becomes an addiction, and maybe not. But it does seem from his reaction and, Aunt Sarah's reaction and Martin's reaction that it might have been the parents' fault or something that for the accident.
Yeah,
they might have been more involved at it, there's grief. I'm sure even if they weren't involved, there'd be grief. I'm not saying that, but the stoicism about it and refusal to mention her name or anything, it seems like they had, they might have a part in it. I'm not sure.
Right. I have a theory, and I'm trying to figure out if I should share it in here or am I going to share it at the back end. But it's, the whole Rosemary thing is a brand new plot arc, so it doesn't have anything to do with Doc Martin. Some things stuck out at me that make me, try and construct what I think happened. I thought it was odd when Martin and Robert were outside of the cafe and they were holding their coffees and Martin was asking Robert questions and he was challenging him on whether he went out. And it just seemed odd when Robert stops and he just said, "I'm still your father. If I say I didn't go out, I didn't go out." And that just seemed like an odd thing to say at that time. I'm still your father. Why was that his complaint on being confronted about whether or not he went out? There was another point where Robert sort of left the room and Vanessa came in and she just says, "Martin, what have you done?" And I just got the sense that Martin probably grew up with, "Martin, what have you done?" Has he been blamed for everything all the time? And Robert says to Martin when he sits down, "You never grew out of fidgeting, did you?" So, and then at the very end when Mark is impaled, Robert comes in and just says, "What have you done here?" And I put all those things together into a theory. I had my complicated grief theory, but now I have my Robert was at fault, but he blamed Martin.
That very well could be, yeah.
It's my theory, and I'm sticking to it until some new piece of information comes up.
I wonder if we'll ever find out.
I know. I don't think it'll be this season. I really think that they have to bring back Martin Clunes and Judith Ivey. I think the parents have to come back for this to all come out.
Yes.
Well, if they're talking about selling Aunt Sarah's house, which might just, I'm assuming it's just for the gambling thing, but if they are truly going to sell the house, opens up a whole nother storyline and they would have to come back.
Yeah.
At some point.
Well, so now wait, maybe I didn't understand that. Are they selling Aunt Sarah's house where Aunt Sarah lives now? Or are they selling their house where they live?
It seems like Aunt Sarah lives in the family house.
Correct.
But it was left to Robert when their parents passed away. But since Aunt Sarah stayed in Portwenn, she's living there.
Right. And of course, Aunt Sarah doesn't have two nickels to rub together, so.
Wow, I totally missed that. I thought they were selling their house where Vanessa and Robert live. Oh,
no, because I guess they grew up in Portwenn, right?
Right.
Yeah,
that's what it sounded like. I only picked it up because when Sarah said, "Why are you here?" Robert replied, "We came to sell the house," and Sarah said, "My house." And he said, "No, it's my house. Our father left it to me."
Okay. That's
the eldest son.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
What did you think of Vanessa's interactions with Elaine, Erica?
Harsh but truthful. Honestly, I think Elaine needed to hear that. I just don't know that she needed to hear it from a complete stranger and in the harsh way that she did hear it. It's time for Elaine to realize I hate to be calling another person garbage, but she does do garbage stuff. Watch me add another rubber band. I think the first episode was her adding a rubber band.
Yeah.
We've seen her opening stuff from a box. We've seen her do some just really dumb stuff that I would never stop on those things if I was scrolling on my phone. So, it is kind of a good point to say, you're not doing this. You're never going to get out of Portwenn and do this. And it was interesting that it didn't click to her when she accidentally filmed the guy throwing up the hairball. And she's like, "Oh, I'm finally taking off." And it's like, because you filmed something that was worth seeing, I guess. I mean, I wouldn't want to see it, but I didn't want to see it in the show.
Yeah. I will share this. The hairball is a plot line of the original Doc Martin, and it is probably everyone's least favorite. Yeah. It was more extensive, and yeah.
We have that to look forward to.
Yes, you do. They portrayed Robert as a gastroenterologist, which was that was different. But the idea of the hairball guy was, you get more character development of even the people who appear on one episode in Doc Martin.
So perhaps this was just a nod because the real Doc Martin, or the original Doc Martin, was guest starring on this show as Robert Best. Was that like a nod to him, or you think this is going to take off and be something?
Well, there are many nods to him that I'm not going to talk about in this segment. But the use of plot arcs differently from Doc Martin in Best Medicine has been happening the whole series. I don't think I've been bringing them up, but this one just bore special mention because it's everybody's least favorite one. I mean, you've got 79 episodes worth of medical problems. That was, yeah. I was a little bummed when Al contradicted Vanessa, because I thought Elaine was taking a lesson, right? That maybe she's just producing garbage content, and then Al turns around and says, "I love your show."
It's a good boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has ulterior motives.
Yes, he does. Do you recall what we learned about Al, though, when they were at the school? Do you recall anything from that? They were looking at pictures on the memory wall. Al had perfect SATs, right?
Yep. He got a perfect math and English score. And that's when Louisa said, and they last for 5 years.
Yeah.
So obviously Al didn't go away to college or take any courses or anything like that locally.
Mm-hmm. But he's a smart cookie. He's probably somebody who could leave Portwenn if he wanted, right? And it looks like they're going to close the school. I was surprised that the principal just bailed.
I assume that was to further Louisa's storyline more than anything. Make her front and center. Because it didn't really make much sense to me for any other reason than to give her more of a prominent role in this in the school.
What do you think, Doug? It sounded like you were going to say something there.
Well, so here's a prediction, and hopefully I won't be wrong or horribly wrong. But so Doc Martin offered to help Aunt Sarah. It's like, I'll help you out, Aunt Sarah. It's like, I'm not taking charity from you. Like, well, so he's a doctor. He had practice. I mean, he's not young, so he drives an Audi. So he has a few dollars. He could save the school for Louisa, his love. He just doesn't realize it yet.
I like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Just throwing it out. So while we're talking about Louisa, so I thought it was interesting how the interaction between her and Mark at the very end, Mark kind of said, "I'm done, I'm moving on." And I thought that was interesting that occurred just a few minutes after Vanessa told Louisa, you can be in love with him. Watch out what you're buying.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was
a great quote, too.
Foreshadowing.
The best men are difficult.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, because you can take best as a family name or an adjective, right? In this case. But yeah, it's interesting that Mark's finally going to move on. And it took me 3 watchings to actually catch what he said, which was, I almost died. And I almost died hating the person who saved me. But I didn't catch that the first 2 times.
I didn't catch that either.
And
so he thinks that Louisa saved?
Because she was the one, because he was panicking, right? He's got this thing stuck through his gut and he's panicking. And she figured out school song would sort of calm him down.
Okay. Got it.
And Martin was praising Louisa, telling her that it was a great plan and keep singing and all that.
You can tell that Louisa really cares for Mark and that their breakup was not out of spite or hate or anything other than they weren't meant to be together. She obviously cares a lot about him. And I think Mark saw that in this episode, that it was not about hating him or him being wrong for something or that he did anything wrong. She does care.
Yeah. Mark would not have been able to make her happy.
I want to know I'd like to see it play out. Several times in this episode, Mark calls Martin his best bud. We're close, we're best buddies, all that. Mark is unaware of Louisa and Martin's kind of connection, sparks. I wonder how Mark will handle it as they potentially move forward.
Yeah. Thoughts on that, Doug?
I have that same exact question as well, Erica. Yep. I think it's going to be a challenge for Mark. Mark will not be very happy.
Even if he's over her at this point?
Well, that's what he says. I'm not sure I believe him.
Yeah. Well, he said something interesting by the memory tree, like he almost wishes they didn't get back together because why have those happy memories, right? If it's not going to be worth anything.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even if you're over the relationship, to see someone you consider your best bud, developing this relationship with someone that you were about to marry could be another opening for another scenario, a storyline kind of thing. I think it would be a missed opportunity if they didn't explore that a little bit and give Mark a little bit more of the humanity side.
Yeah. When you remember after Louisa broke up with Mark, who's the first person Mark starts wooing is Louisa's coworker, Jeannie, right? So he went for somebody close to her right off the bat.
So fair's fair.
Little karma. We are officially renewed for season 2. Hoorah. Yes. In my mind, that's where we needed to be. Because if they've got 13 episodes in the bag and they're getting feedback from the audience on what's working and what's not, you don't really have a chance to fix anything or change anything. They made certain creative decisions for this season on how characters were going to be played, and maybe we'll be able to see things moved in a direction that would make us as viewers, not that we're a representative sample necessarily, but, happier viewers.
I did have one odd observation about the dog.
Yeah?
So when Martin and Robert were walking, the dog's trotting along, and we've seen over the last few episodes, as much as Martin doesn't want anything to do with the dog, you kind of sense that he's starting to get used to him being around, and made the joke with Louisa. I think it was last episode. She said, "I like your pet," or something. He's like, "It's not my pet."
Right. Yeah.
But
not my dog.
He took it like a step further with his dad, and he was like, "I don't know that dog. I've never even seen that dog."
Mm-hmm.
It almost kind of made me get a sense of fear from Martin to Robert. Like, didn't want to show that he actually cared for an animal. A filthy dog, I think is what Robert called him, or something like that. Like, his reaction was just so much more over the top than what he normally does when people say, "Is that your dog?" or "That's your pet." He kind of said, just was very specific to, "That's not my dog. I've never seen it before."
I thought that was odd. But I agree with you, Eric. I think he's fearful of telling the truth, or I'm not sure what's up with it.
Maybe looking weak, or, well, we go back to the emotion thing. They aren't very emotional people to each other. So one would think, since there's not a lot of emotions and, physical interactions with parents and with Martin admitting that he lets this dog follow him around, even if he doesn't admit it's his dog, would be very disappointing to Robert. So I think he took it a step further to say, "I don't even know that dog." Because we open up with him, his father walking in, and he's holding a chicken. And now we see a dog following them. Martin doesn't want to look weak in front of his father. Even in the doctor's office when he was looking at patients, anytime that Robert superseded him, "No, do this, no, do that," with Mark's injury, "No, we're doing this, we can't do that," Martin just shut down and shut up and just did it, which we haven't seen him do in other episodes. He's usually very good at fighting for his patients.
He did overrule Robert with respect to the guy with the cantaloupe balls.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna send a prescription down to the pharmacist for some pills or something, and Robert was the one who wanted to give him the shot. That was a funny scene.
I think going with the pills was a good choice from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm sure, yes. I would think, that would certainly hurt less. I'm sure there would be a local anesthetic, but and at least give the guy an ice pack, right? Robert certainly had far more animosity and disgust towards the dog than we've seen from Martin. I mean, he was very much like giving that dog a wide berth. You can tell that Aunt Sarah has no love lost for Robert. And I'm sure it's because he gave her the ultimatum, right? Choose the principal or choose your nephew. And we find out that Aunt Sarah chooses the principal over her nephew, right?
I would like a little more of that story. I mean, because that's a big choice. I mean, you're talking about your everyday life, someone that you love, and family that you love but only see, a couple weeks a year. I don't know. Do you choose to be alone for 90% of the year, to be with your nephew 10% of the time? Or do you choose 90% of the year you're with somebody that is a companion and a love? I don't want to make that choice. I would not want to have that choice. But
we have to remember that, it's even if we call it, 2 out of 12, right? 1/6 of the year is with Martin. This is the nephew whose sister was killed in a car accident, and he was in the car. So, there's extenuating circumstances around, I don't know, family, blood thicker than water. I don't know.
I don't think I would have made the same decision, but I'm not gonna blame point fingers at her.
Right. We won't judge. We won't judge.
Yeah. We don't know all the facts around it,
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to find out. They could certainly.
Right. I'd like to know more.
Yeah, me too.
We could do a flashback or something on that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But it was very touching when she did ask, as we talked about before, for forgiveness, and Martin said he didn't need it. It was very raw of him to say, I thought it was me. I thought I was just annoying or too much, I think he said.
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard to say to anybody, to open up like that.
Yeah. Of all of the episodes, where would you put this one in your favorites, not favorites?
I think this might be my favorite one. Yeah, lots of growth, lots of still fun, still insight, a little quirkiness here and there to keep it light. But I thought there was just so much packed in that I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it as well. But yeah, I think for me, it's in the middle.
You really wanted to understand.
I guess I was really hoping there'd be more depth of understanding the Rosemary thing and the blood thing, but that really didn't play out. Yeah. So that's probably my own fault for having those expectations.
I had those expectations, and I gave you guys those expectations, like, this is the episode, right?
But I have to say, what I liked about it is I keep talking about like the blood and stuff, and what was annoying me about not knowing what happened. At least we're no longer just seeing him see blood and freak out. Like, we see him evolving with it and trying to test his boundaries, and we see him now. Elaine knows and Louisa know. Same thing with like other character developments and things. And the Rosemary story, at least we're talking about it. He wrote he wrote her name down. So I don't necessarily need to know right away everything. I'm just glad we finally have something. And that's why I really liked the story. Yes, I obviously would have loved all the answers right away, because who wouldn't? But at least we got something.
I found this plot to be a more complex plot, right? Like I said at the beginning, it wasn't just wrapped around an event. But the idea, there was so much more. It was just a much more complex plot, a lot more things going on that seemed to me to be real human experiences. So to me, this seemed much more like a Doc Martin episode than prior Best Medicine episodes, which just all screamed sitcom to me, whereas this one did not scream sitcom to me.
Yes.
This is more of the dramedy where funny things happen. So that made me happy. I don't know what's going to happen going forward.
That's probably why I picked it as one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hearing you describe it like that is I'm confident that's why I really liked it.
Yeah. It wasn't just light, fluffy, formulaic stuff. I hope we see these two characters again. I don't think that they're predicted to come in this season, so I certainly hope they don't drag this stuff into next season, because wouldn't that be terrible? Anyway, the fact that they've got 12 more episodes after this one that are planned for next season, it's good news. I don't know when they're filming that. One thing I thought was interesting about this episode was that Martin was actually recommending a treatment for Mark that wasn't the best treatment for Mark. And his recommendation was based on his blood phobia.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, now that you say that.
Right?
Well,
he did not. He wanted the EMTs to arrive. He wanted to just cut the wire and send them off. And here's his father, the gastroenterologist, who's saying, "No, we've got to pull this thing and get that foreign body out of him as quickly as we can to save on infectious sources," or whatever it was. Martin even says there's going to be blood. He says there'll be a lot of blood.
Yeah, I heard him say there's going to be a lot of blood, but I thought he was making the decision, if we go back into the episode with the guy that swallows the hair, trichophobia or something, whatever that is.
Yeah, I forget what it was, yeah.
I forget what that is. He was also recommending the guy go to the hospital when his father was saying, no, he doesn't need to go.
No, I don't think his father recommended he didn't need to go.
When he came back,
mm-hmm.
and the guy said before he actually threw up the hairball.
Right.
Martin said, you have to go to the hospital right now.
Right.
And Robert said, no, come back in. We'll look at you. I'm a gastroenterologist. And then he tripled over and then threw up the hairball. Yeah. And then that's what he was like. So I kind of thought it was almost like when I watched that scene, I thought it was a challenge with his father. Like, I wanted the other guy to go to the hospital. You were going to examine him. Now I'm saying he has to go to the hospital. You're fighting with me again. But you're right. It might have been just as simple as the blood.
Yeah. What did you think, Doug?
Well, I've recalled other medical shows, and I don't know whether it was ER or maybe even The Pit, but I do remember items being stuck in people, and they come into the ER with the thing still stuck in them.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that they just didn't cut it off, and then he could go to the hospital and he wouldn't bleed out.
One thing that I noticed was, it took multiple viewings to see this, was Robert had Martin's ultrasound, and he actually ultrasounded the area and said it hasn't penetrated the capsule or whatever. So he looked at the guy and knew that it was not a problem to remove it. And the reason that I thought Martin was sending hairball guy off to the hospital was he knew he had a bowel obstruction because he could tell from like the way the guy felt and everything. So he knew he had to go basically to a gastroenterologist in, I was just about to say Truro because that's Doc Martin, Bar Harbor. But Robert is a gastroenterologist. So he was like, I can examine you right now. So to me, it was a different scenario. It was like, okay, Martin wants to send him to an expert. And in Robert's case, he is the expert where Martin wasn't for the first one. And then in the second case, Robert is also the expert. But Martin is saying, if we pull it out, there's going to be, there'll be a lot of blood. And Robert's like, doctors don't mind a little blood. Right? And thank God for Elaine to get that bandage in there and send him off. Well, good. Obviously, you guys are going to keep watching. You're too invested at this point. To Erica, I was worried about you halfway through the season, but I think you're in for a penny, in for a pound now.
I was too. I was waffling there a bit.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I stuck to it, and I'm definitely going to keep watching.
Good. And Doug, I know you've got that DVR set. You're ready. And next week, I believe we will have Patty back.
Oh, cool.
So that's good news. And the week after that, the 17th, St. Patrick's Day, there is no episode. And then they'll finish out the series with maybe, 3 more after that. So, yeah. But cool.
Nice.
Listen, everybody out here who's watching or listening to this, I hope you will like it if you indeed like it. And subscribe to the podcast. And I would like to thank every one of my existing subscribers because we have over 100 subscribers now, which is great. We had 18 just a couple of weeks ago, so things are catching on. Please leave comments. We've had people interacting on the site, which I absolutely enjoy, and I reply to all those comments. Yeah. And as I mentioned, I've got a little public service announcement that you can watch after this, and then we'll go into our Doc Martin people. So thank you guys again, and we'll see you next week.
See you.
Take care.
Thanks. Here's my little Podcast Portwenn service announcement. This episode informs us that the Best family doesn't discuss Rosemary and is so shut down about it that Robert can't even say her name. When I saw the preview for last week's episode, that hit me in the gut. I want to tell folks, if you have a tragedy that hits your family, especially when you have small children, shutting down and burying it is a defense mechanism, but it's really not a good way to go. My dad lost his first wife when he had an almost 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 1.5-year-old. His approach to handling it was to shut down, tell the children that it was very sad, but they had to move on, and then they never talked about it. He remarried and they had me. Even though I wasn't even a twinkle in anyone's eyes when this all happened, Dad's approach, which I'm sure that he perceived as a gift to us, that we could reason away or apply logic to get ourselves out of any emotion, that was not the right approach for children. It impacted my siblings greatly, and based on the general vibe that is set in the family and the approach my parents took to emotion, it affected me too. It taught us all that emotions, especially the quote-unquote bad ones like hurt and sadness, were useless, silly to dwell in, and optional. All of us had mental health issues that we had to work on, and my brother never beat his, dying of a fentanyl overdose. So if tragedy strikes you like this, please talk about it, grieve, get help to work through it. Do not say, I cannot and I will not talk about her. Thanks for listening. This is the part where we're going to segue into the Doc Martin people. So if you're a Best Medicine Unspoiled listener or watcher, this is where you want to bail out. There will be Doc Martin spoilers in this one, especially given it was the episode that had Martin Clunes in it. Plenty of things for us to talk about. So if you do not want to get those spoilers, you want to leave now, this is my final warning. It seems quite fitting to have a Doc Martin superfan in the studio today to talk about the long-awaited Martin Clunes episode of Best Medicine, cleverly titled Doc Martin. So we're joined today by Kathy. Come through and welcome back to Podcast Portwenn.
Hey there, Chesla. How are you doing today?
I am well, and it's great to see you again. Thanks for joining.
My pleasure, completely.
Excellent. So we've been waiting for this one for a long time. I just want to put a quarter in you and let you go.
Oh, yes. Well, this is the best one yet, the best episode yet. That doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's definitely the best episode yet.
I agree.
I've decided that they are really to the point where they're just taking off and this is their own show.
Yes.
This is not really, it's maybe inspired by Doc Martin, but it's their own show. They're doing their own thing. The Doc's parents coming to visit. Both parents were interesting. They were so different from Dr. Ellingham's parents.
Yeah.
His mother especially. Martin Ellingham's mother was, society matron. Everything was just so. You did everything perfectly. Vanessa, Dr. Best's mother, is a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm not sure which, but she has clients and she goes for radical honesty.
Yes.
And she has Margaret Ellingham had opinions about everything, but Vanessa Best definitely has opinions about everything.
Yeah.
And she doesn't hesitate to express them. So, for instance, she told Elaine that you're just spouting garbage when you could be doing great art.
Yes. And a message I thought Elaine needed to hear.
Yes. But then Al told her, no, I love everything you do. And I thought, Al, don't mess this up. She could be doing something better.
But you know what that reminded me of, though, was Al hiding Pauline's application for nursing school.
Yes, that really upset me.
Yeah.
Yeah, he shouldn't have done that. And she found him out and she went off to nursing school anyway.
We learned that Al has perfect scores on his SATs, right? So he's a smart kid. Do you think he just loves Elaine and wants to support her by being complimentary? Or do you think he really believes that she's doing good stuff? Because, I think all of us know she's not, unless it's an age group thing and they think that this is fun. Or is he, in a sense, kind of undermining her because if she continues to do garbage, she won't leave the town. She won't be successful.
That's a good way of looking at it. But the whole town seems to support her in her efforts. So I don't think it's just Al. But yes, I think it's a little bit of both. He doesn't want her to leave. But on the other hand, he could probably go anywhere he wants if he's got those SAT scores. And as Louisa pointed out, they're good for 5 years.
Yeah. And he's charming, too.
Yeah. So he could be staying for his father.
Mm-hmm.
Not likely, but possible. But partially for Elaine, and then maybe he just likes living in Portwenn. I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. He could make a life there, but he could also do something else and then come back and be a benefit to the town.
Yeah.
But anyway, on the thought of Vanessa, Martin Best's mother, who else did she criticize? She criticized Sarah, telling her that this bluster of hers was just covering up her insecurities or something. I can't even remember what. Sarah got right back at her, thank goodness.
Yes.
She also criticized Mark. How could you possibly be a friend? And this is not what she said, but I'm paraphrasing. A friend of my son's when you have no cognitive ability, whatever. You're so basically dumb.
Yeah. That was pretty cruel.
And Mark just, lets it slide right off. Oh, you're so funny. You're just like your son. I think.
Right. And pulls them in for a group hug like they all loved that.
Right. I still can't understand how Louisa was with him for 8 years. But then Vanessa, again, she with her radical honesty, she tells Louisa that she's very kind.
Yes.
And I as much as I don't really like this version of Louisa because she's kind of shrill and nervous and just seems to be all over the place, she is kind.
She is very kind. I thought we got a sense right off the bat for Vanessa and Robert, the distance between the Best family when Martin calls them by their first names.
Well, that could be the psychologist's mother.
I remember growing up, it was a thing that people would call their parents, but you just have him, just the way he says, I am their offspring. It wasn't they are my parents, it was I am their offspring. And I wonder if they're sending us a message with that, like, they don't parent at all, but yeah, they bore me.
Yes. On the other hand, Vanessa and Robert seem somewhat close. Mm-hmm. He was defending her to Martin. She can't even go to the salon now because of him. Right. He has embarrassed them. Yeah. And I thought, I don't recall Christopher or Margaret Ellingham saying that Martin had embarrassed them by moving to Portwenn in Cornwall? I don't recall.
I mean, they certainly thought that he embarrassed him by becoming a GP in a backwards town. So I got that sense that, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it was the backwater idea, but the whole idea that he was a GP was very embarrassing because he had fallen from such a high position.
Right. They were very critical of him. They treated him as he was a horrible son. He never did anything that they did to make them feel better. So on the scale of parenting, I think they were the worst parents. And then the bests are, they're not great parents, but they're not average, but they're one or two rungs above the Ellinghams.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. It would be tough to be worse than the Ellinghams. I mean, we don't get a sense that Martin's been beaten or locked in a closet.
No.
Right?
No.
And told he was miserable his whole life and always weak and always a sensitive
Whining.
child and a whiner and all that. So
And letting bullies beat up on him. We didn't get that.
No.
From them anyway.
No. We don't even have a marriage strain between Robert and Vanessa until the ending. Right? I mean, they seem to be fine together. They're happy together. And it's not until Robert's gambling problem and the sort of lying he's been doing to Vanessa pops up.
Yeah, that was, he really has a problem. And I have to wonder when they go back to their home, as he said, she's up there plotting against me or something. And Martin says, well, maybe not. Maybe it'll be okay.
Plotting her revenge.
I wonder how things will go for them when they get back to their home. I mean, I would think that he needs to go back to work to pay off his gambling debts.
Mm-hmm.
Will he be able to avoid Francesca, his bookie?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting difference in the plots there. The new things that I thought we saw here, I don't know about you, but I've always wondered, like, there's no insurance forms, there's no payments in this office, but we finally see a reference to a copay with a chicken, right? And there's a little nod back to Doc Martin, because doesn't Edith Montgomery say, do they pay you in chickens or something like that?
Yes, she does, yes.
So here's somebody paying him in chickens.
Right when his parents walk in the door.
Yes, the most embarrassing thing. His whole office is in bedlam.
It really was.
Yeah.
With the little kid blowing on his horn, and obviously not very good at it, just like the little girl who moved in across the alley played the violin. It was awful.
Bernie.
Yes.
Yeah.
And her mother, who just thought she was so talented.
That's right.
You know, we've talked about how most of the episodes focus on an event in the town. You know, some kind of event. And I was thinking, well, we don't really have an event, but we do. It's the sleep-in, the sleepover.
Yeah. Just from a Doc Martin perspective, I thought that there were a lot of what I would call broad similarities that we saw, and there were also a lot of little subtle Easter eggy kind of things.
I mean, the broad one was the guy with the hairball.
Yes. Yep. And Martin trying to do his exposure training or desensitization with the blood.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yep. The need to sell Aunt Sarah's house.
Yes.
Because, it was left to him. I mean, it wasn't half his in this show like it was in Doc Martin. It was like all his, and she was just living there.
So I wonder if it really is, but she's been living there for ages.
So it must have been in the will. That's why it was left. It was left to me as the eldest son.
Of course, you could buy it from me.
Yeah.
Jerk
is right. And that was delivered very, you just get a sense that there's not a lot of love lost between Sarah and Robert, right?
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very pompous.
Yeah. And we've got the Aunt Sarah having an affair thread.
Right. Which is why Martin could no longer come and visit her when he was 10 or 11 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. But a different choice on her part.
Yeah, I was surprised that she would choose her lover as over him.
I was also surprised, but it wasn't like a John Slater situation with Auntie Joan, because Slater was unattached.
Exactly.
Whereas Sarah was the unattached one, and we don't know the name of this man, but was he going to leave his wife to be with her?
Well, obviously not.
Yeah, because they moved away. But yeah, so Aunt Sarah, just like Aunt Joan, it ends up being a lose-lose proposition because she loses Martin and she loses him. And
Yeah.
Aunt Joan gave up John Slater for Martin, made the other sacrifice. And then Christopher wouldn't send Martin.
Yeah, she lost Martin anyway.
Yeah.
Did you notice his voice?
Yeah, I mean, I thought a very good American accent. Erica and Doug didn't even think, oh yeah, that's right, this guy's British. Like, they didn't even have this. It sounded like a guy faking an accent.
To me, it didn't sound like Martin Clunes, but his voice sounded raspy to me, like maybe in trying to do the American accent, he was doing something with his throat, and maybe that could just be me.
Have you ever tried to do an accent? I looked at some YouTube videos on RP on how to actually speak with a British accent. It is difficult, and your vocal cords act differently. Like it's as if you've trained your voice to be one way your whole life, and now you're asking it to do something very different. But it's difficult. It is difficult to do that. So I agree. It was raspy and a little higher pitched. And I also think that could have been a creative choice in order to add the age factor. So we went through some of the broad similarities. There were also some more subtle reminders. Do you remember any of them?
Well, neither one of them likes dogs. Martin Ellingham can't stand dogs. Martin Best doesn't particularly care for them, but he's getting used to the little dog. But Robert Best really just excoriates the dog, It's something horrible.
Yeah, he really was avoiding him. I mean, really giving him a wide berth.
Right. And Martin Best says, well, he does have a point. When he went out, that was funny.
Yes.
I didn't laugh much at this show, but I chuckled a little bit at that. But Robert Best is very brusque. Brusque?
Brusque.
When the hairball guy threw up and they were leaving, he shouted back to Elaine, your name, whoever you are, get that cleaned up. It's unhygienic.
Mm-hmm.
That's very much a Martin Ellingham thing to say. And that was right after his wife had told her she wasn't putting out garbage.
Yeah.
When Robert Best crashed his car into the tree, avoiding a squirrel. You don't even like squirrels, his son says.
Yeah.
Mark Milo was there saying, oh, these are your parents. Oh, I'm his best friend.
Yeah.
And Vanessa looks at him and she goes, you couldn't possibly be my son's best friend. You're not very smart.
Yeah.
Poor Mark. But nonetheless, Mark just lets it go right over his head, and he pulls everyone in for a group hug. I don't know about Vanessa, but Robert and Martin aren't into group hugs. So that was a very awkward, funny moment.
And I just thought of that when you were talking that in Doc Martin, Christopher Ellingham, it's not Margaret, but Christopher Ellingham is very disparaging of Mark Milo, because that's when he says he's going to have to lock her up to keep her about Julie.
Right. And it's interesting that Christopher Ellingham is very much a ladies' man.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Best refused even the thought that he would have an affair. I would never do that.
It seems to me those two are actually a good couple still.
Yes, I agree. I think they're still maybe not happily married, but definitely contented there with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Until the very end, when Vanessa finds out he's got a gambling problem and he's basically thrown away all their money.
And been lying to her.
And he had been lying to her, and she goes, here I am, how can I put myself out there as a respected psychologist when I can't even realize what's going on with my own husband?
Right.
Let's see.
Well, we were talking about when Robert says he swerved to avoid a squirrel. In my mind, I was thinking, yeah, a squirrel that wasn't there. And I was thinking of Anthony.
Maybe it was Anthony.
Yeah.
Cross the pond.
That was an Easter egg for Doc Martin fans. It obviously wasn't they didn't use an imaginary squirrel that was 6 feet tall as part of the plot. But to me, that felt like a little nod to Anthony.
Yeah. And Robert Best frequently says, stop talking to patients.
Yes.
And which is a Martin Ellingham thing. And especially when he was operating on Mark Milo with the wires sticking through him. And Martin looked up at him and he says, that's no way to talk to a patient. He's a person. Robert Best just looks at him like, he's a patient.
I think the wording was, he was calling him the patient. And Martin said, he's not just a patient, he's a person. And that was like like Louisa in Doc Martin could have said that to Martin.
Right, easily.
Right? They're not bodies, they're people.
So there are little Easter eggs for the Doc Martin fans, but the more I watched that, the more I realized that they are gradually working into their own TV show.
They are. They are. With respect to other subtle reminders, you were talking about Mark saying he was his friend. I also noticed later at the end he called Martin his partner, which seemed very dynamic duo-ish.
Yeah.
And when the guy had the cantaloupe balls and the two of them were looking.
And you're thinking Gilbert's...
Yes.
Gilbert
Spencer with the breasts.
Yeah, with the breasts.
Wow.
Wow.
That was like the only wow and surprise on the face that I think we ever saw of Martin Ellingham, but that definitely reminded me of that.
Right. I'd almost forgotten that. Yes. And I loved how they debated about how to treat him. You know, would you rather have cantaloupe balls for a week or a day?
Right. But far more invasive to give the man a shot. Thanks, Doc. So.
And the patient is going, you're going to give me a shot where?
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what that scene also reminded me of. And it was on Martin and Louisa's wedding day. Before he got in the taxi, he was examining a woman with her feet up, and he was looking and whatnot. For some reason or another, the two of them looking there reminded me of that.
Yeah.
So, like you said, there are just little tiny Easter eggs all throughout.
And, sometimes they might not even be intentional, and we might just be picking things up because we're kind of attuned and looking.
Oh, I'm sure they're intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all the things that they did in Doc Martin. Even the reference of Anthony the giant squirrel and Stuart James.
Yeah.
James Stewart and his giant, rabbit. That was just, obvious right there. They were picking stuff up.
And the eggplant and tomatoes. There were a lot of little sight gags and stuff in Doc Martin.
Yes.
All right. So if we look at this now, instead of looking at it as comparisons with Doc Martin, just overall, I liked this episode. And I think the reason I really liked it so much is, to me, this seemed like a drama where funny things happened, which is how I've always sort of described Doc Martin. Like, it's not a comedy, it's not slapstick, it's a drama.
Yeah.
But funny things happen, and it's realistic, and they've got character development. In this particular episode, you see the hairball guy, but you learn nothing about his backstory. You don't care about him. He's just a guy with a problem who's he's a caricaturish patient, whereas in Doc Martin, that guy was losing his farm, and he was contacting his financial people, and you were hoping that he would get to be living at his farm again, and he was renting from Auntie Joan. There was a whole backstory with this man that we don't get here. That said, with Vanessa and Robert, we get character development at a good depth, right?
For this episode, I really thought that the writing was much better than it had been in the previous episodes. And I don't know why that would be, if Martin Clunes or Philippa Braithwaite had any influence on the writing, but it was, I thought, much improved. Because, as you said, it was more of a drama with funny things happening, as opposed to being almost a slapstick comedy, which some of the earlier episodes were.
Yeah.
So it had more depth.
Yeah, didn't it? I felt like people just stepped up their game.
Yeah. So I hope that continues. As Joe Penhale would say, fingers crossed.
Yes. Yeah. We did learn a lot about these two characters, more than we would learn about. I was thinking of like George and Greg. They told us their backstory. He was a chef and he was a finance guy. So you kind of got that narrative. You got a little bit of more show than tell with these characters, where you got to see them interacting with each other more. And there's just, I don't know.
And at the end, when Martin Best confronts his father and said, "Why did we never talk about it? Why can't you say her name? Say my sister's name."
Yeah.
And Robert Best, he goes, "I can't and I won't say her name." It was really, really, you want to call it dramatic. It was almost tragic. Yeah. And I think it leaves us open for them to return in the future. We need them to. I'm not sure how they'll come back, because the people that wrote Doc Martin's episodes always surprised me. it never went the way I thought it was going to go.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
maybe it won't go the same way here. They'll find an interesting way to bring them back. I
Yeah.
hope.
I mean, we need to understand that accident
Yes.
because clearly whatever happened is what explains Martin's standoffishness and all that, but it also, we don't know why he developed a blood phobia. We know that he
Well,
saw this girl who reminded him of his sister, so you could understand why he would freeze in the surgery, because he would just be like, oh my gosh, but why then have a blood phobia after that?
well, why then did Martin Ellingham get a blood phobia after he had the same kind of reaction in a surgery? It was one of his patients, a routine surgery, nothing special. And then he got there and he saw her as a person, someone who had a family, not just a body. And suddenly he couldn't do it. And we don't have that from Martin Best. I mean, we have that Sarah said it reminded him of his sister. And maybe that was enough. But that would get him off of surgery. Why would it make him sick at the sight of blood? And he is very sick at the sight of blood. It's even more severe than it was with Martin Ellingham.
Yeah.
So
There's a story there that we don't know yet.
right. And we would like to know what happened there.
Yes.
And why will Robert Best not talk about it? Why will he refuse to talk about it?
Right.
Yeah, what's going on there? Now, we never really got Vanessa's input. We don't know how she feels about it. Obviously, it really deeply hurt Robert Best, and that's why he's suppressing it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But we don't know Vanessa's story, and that's her daughter. You would think she would be very emotional about it.
But as the psychiatrist, she might have more tools.
Or maybe that's why she went into psychiatry.
And we don't know if it was a post-family career choice or if it's something that she was doing previously.
Yeah, so, yeah, we want, I don't say we need, because of course we do, but we want to know more of the story.
Right.
And since they've been renewed for a second season, I'm thinking we'll get it.
Yeah. There's a theory that I proposed in the top half of this episode. I'm going to share it with you to see what you think about it. I'm already sort of rethinking it, even though I sounded very sure about it in the top part of this. I took like 4 quotes from the show that seemed strange to me. And I'm always looking for plot arcs, right? I thought it was odd outside of, it's probably the Salty Breeze where they were coming out with coffees, where Martin is challenging Robert, you went out last night, and why are you lying about it? And his response is, I'm still your father. If I say I didn't go out, I didn't go out. That just sounded like an odd line, and you could either say, well, that's a really strange piece of writing, or you could say they're seeding that for something to make sense later. Vanessa challenges Martin after Robert gets mad at him and leaves. Martin, what have you done? And at the very end, when they're treating Mark, Robert comes in, and Martin's there with Mark, and his, what have you done here? And it's not clear who that's addressed to. Like, is it addressed to Martin? Like, did you screw this up? And then when Martin first sits down with Robert, he says, you never grew out of fidgeting, did you? And to me, it's like, you seed these little things because a plot later on is going to refer back to them, right?
I thought the fidgeting comment was just a criticism, one of those things to make Martin feel smaller.
It could very well be. Could very well be.
Make his father feel like a better man.
Yeah. But my theory is that Robert caused the accident, Rosemary's accident, and blamed it on Martin. Or at least, made it seem like it was Martin's fault in some way.
But I think he would have expressed that opinion to Martin if that's how he had felt. And Martin would have been more defensive about it. That it's still a good, plausible theory.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to know.
Yeah.
The I'm your father, and if I said I didn't go out, then I didn't go out. That struck me as an odd way to respond to Martin. But on the other hand, as you said, maybe there's more to it.
Mm-hmm.
He's always been, I'm the authority figure. I'm always right. And you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It could be as simple as that.
And another way of putting Martin down.
I'm always trying to solve things.
But it did seem like an odd statement. And then what was the other one you said?
Martin, what have you done?
What have you done the 2 different times? What have you done?
What have you done here?
Well, the what have you done? That's interesting. Is it his fault for everything? Is everything Martin's fault?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah, because even his mother said, "What have you done, Martin?"
Yeah. And one thing that I have earlier in this episode, I put in a little Podcast Portwenn service announcement. When I first saw the trailer for this show last week, and they talked about, don't you think it's strange that we never talked about it, or never talked about what happened? But just relating back to my PSA that people might have seen earlier, I was thinking the one time I ever heard my dad talk about his wife dying, I don't even know why it came up, but we were sitting at the dinner table. He was there, Mom was there, and all I remember him saying, because he was very stoic and he never talked about it, he said something about the policeman came to the house and said, your wife was in a car accident. And I said, is she okay? And he said, I'm sorry, sir. She expired like she was a magazine subscription. And he just started crying. And after I did my little public service announcement, I thought, gosh, when you let it go, when you talk about it, it just... So my theory of just, it's Robert's blaming it on Martin, that's just me being Machiavellian and knowing that Martin Ellingham's parents were so horrible, right? These parents may not be horrible. They may not have done this evil thing and blamed their son for something that wasn't their fault. It just might be as simple as Robert Best not being able to deal with that grief of losing his daughter.
I don't think he can handle it. That's why he suppressed it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like your father did. And at some point, hopefully in another episode, it will come out. But I think he's suppressed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine losing a child like that.
Or your wife. Just one day she's there and the next day she's not. And it's, for the kids, for everybody, it's devastating, but... Yeah, wild. But I really enjoyed this episode. One thing that I will say that is a credit to Martin Clunes. Imagine if Sean Connery had to be the villain in a James Bond movie with Roger Moore. And how would the audience watching that be able to separate the two characters effectively? And I felt, as a huge Doc Martin fan, and you're a huge Doc Martin fan, I didn't see Doc Martin. I didn't see Martin Ellingham. I wasn't thinking of Martin Ellingham at all. There was a character called Robert Best. And yeah, there he was. And I think that's just Martin Clunes.
I was thinking a little more about Martin Clunes and what an incredibly skilled actor he is to be able to... There were bits of Martin Ellingham in his characterization of Robert Best, but a lot of it was just Robert Best. So I see what you mean, but I have to confess, I still saw not Martin Ellingham, but Martin Clunes in some of them.
Yeah. And we were very attuned to that. But I saw Robert Best and just all the little ticks, because I watched the show several times, and he's got more than just the head thing. He had his hand at one point was doing weird things. His mouth was doing weird things. It was like there were many little ticks, not just the sort of head movement stuff.
And then the falling asleep. I thought that was so funny. And Vanessa slaps him on the side and goes, "What? Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we have the same opinion. This was our favorite of the show so far.
Yeah, and I can't decide if it was my favorite because Martin Clunes was in it. I do not like to categorize myself as a clunatic, but I have to confess that I probably am.
I can resonate with that thought. I'm not a fangirl. Like Oliver was saying that, I'm not a fangirl. That's not me. But if I'm a clunatic, I'm also a Neil-atic for Sam Neill and a Hopkins-atic for Anthony Hopkins. Like, I have lots of favorites. My current most favorite right now is Martin Clunes.
I've never been a fangirl. There are probably 3 shows that I always wanted to watch. One was Lost. Mm-hmm. And then The X-Files, and Gilmore Girls. Those were my 3 shows that I would want to always be able to see. But I can't tell you anything else until Doc Martin came along. And then, but then I was retired by the time I started watching Doc Martin. And I had the time to obsess over it. Yeah. Which I've never had the time before.
Doc Martin struck a note in me, and I think it is because of what I just shared with respect to how I grew up.
Yeah.
And to me, watching this guy who he built up a whole bunch of emotional armor, and everything is just intellectual. That's how I grew up. So when I tell people, I've shared in numerous podcasts, I feel very much Martin-like. To me, watching the show it's therapeutic. And the stories that I write, they're my therapy. I mean, I am doing therapy. I'm working on Martin, but I'm really working on me.
Yeah, I read your most recent one. Yeah, it was very interesting. But I was unaware of your own personal experiences when I was reading it.
So I'm doing therapy when I'm writing my stories. But I think that's why this show has been that meaningful to me and just hit me. It really grabbed me as, gosh, this guy is me. And how's he going to make out? Is he going to be okay?
But he's not you.
I know.
Okay.
Well, I'm the cheerful Martin Ellingham. But you'll see all of the positive emotions from me, but you're not going to see a lot of anything else. Those are the bad ones that you can't have.
Okay.
Yeah, still working on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I relate to anyone in either show. But Martin is the reason I got hooked on this show, because it was like, what makes this man the way he is? Mm-hmm. That just intrigued me. So,
yeah. This has been great. I always appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Kathy. And for everybody who's out there watching, please like the show. Please subscribe to the show. Forward it to your friends who like Doc Martin. Tell them about it. Write comments. If you have ideas for other things you'd like on podcasts, drop them. Can't guarantee anything, but I'm always looking for things. So, Kathy, thanks again so much.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining Podcast Portwenn. Podcast Portwenn is an independent fan production, not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by Buffalo Pictures, ITV, Fox, or the creators of Doc Martin or Best Medicine.